What's up, guys? It's Professor Gnome, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Twilight Masquerade set and doing a little bit of a set list breakdown. I wasn't exactly sure how to format this, but this is the way that I'm going to go about it for this video. If there's a different way that you know of or would prefer, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But I thought we'd just start from the top and just work our way through the set, point out any useful cards, and kind of give my opinions on them as we go along. So yeah, be sure to, let me know what you think of some of the cards. Let me know what your favorite cards are, all that kind of stuff. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, all that. And we'll get started here. Also, last little announcement before I get into the breakdown. The first ever community Discord tournament will be on June 1st. It's a little bit away, but it's the first day that I could actually get it scheduled. So we'll be doing June 1st at 7 p.m. EST. So hopefully all of you can make it. I will put the link to the tournament registry in the description of the next video to come out, which should be Alakazam EX, since it was the next video to win the poll. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, let's get into the breakdown. So we're gonna start here. Tangela and Tangle Growth, pretty much not really very good. Pinsir, not super great. And Spinarak is okay, and then we get to Ariados. Ariados is the first card I want to talk about, just because it has a kind of a fun ability, in which your opponent's active evolutionary Pokemon retreat cost is 1 more, and it has the attack for 10 damage, plus 30 for each retreat cost that your opponent's Pokemon has. So I think this, I don't think it's going to be good, but I think you can combine it with a couple cards and things like Spite Ops EX and things like that to make this actually kind of a fun little rogue deck, and something I'm definitely going to be exploring as the set kind of continues and when this set comes out. So I can imagine playing I would say a 2-2 line of both maybe. Then you'd probably want Barrel or something as some sort of draw engine potentially, or a Manaphy could be good, and then you're just stacking retreat costs on your opponent, hitting them for as much damage as possible. I could even see playing the Minior as well in this list. I think that would actually be pretty good. So yeah, I think it'd be a fun little rogue deck, so something I wanted to point out as we go about this. Sunflora, not very good. It has a really fun attack, which is just doing 60 damage for every fire energy attached to our opponent, which in theory means that 3 energy Charizard would be, we'd be able to KO it. But with 2 energy, we don't do enough. So it's pretty worthless, actually, because that's the only card that right now in the format would have fire energies on it consistently enough to make this viable. But it doesn't really do that well, so not great, but I thought I'd point it out. None of these cards are really all that great. The Slowing Perfume could be okay, where you get to shuffle one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the deck if you're going second and it's your first turn. It could be Slight Disruption. I'm not sure of a deck that it would matter right now in the format, but maybe it's something that could potentially come up more importantly later if Arceus decks really pick up. Being able to shuffle something back could kind of prevent them, something they want to use an evolution on the following turn. I could see that being useful, but probably not very good. The rest of these cards also not super great. The next card to get to that I think is actually good and worth really talking about is Thwackey, since it has the Boom Boom Drum ability. And what that does is that once per turn, if your active Pokemon has the Festival Lead ability, you may search your deck for a card to put into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It pretty much just becomes Pidgeot EX. It's super strong. The Festival Lead cards are not very good, but I think having Thwackey is going to make it a lot better, since you could run 2 and really get your deck going. It's only a stage 1, so being able to get it out, you can do very quickly. The Grookey art is super cute, so that's always a benefit. Rillaboom kind of sucks. but that's fine. You probably wouldn't be playing it anyway. You could maybe play one if you really, really wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just keep it thwacky and keep it pushing with the ability. The Festival Lead cards as a whole, as we're going to see, are not super, super good, but I do think that a card that's coming up in a second, we'll pull it up, Driplin. Driplin does have the Festival Lead ability, and this card's actually good. So I think really to play the Festival Lead deck, you're just going to be playing like a 4/4 line of Driplin and like a 3/3 line, or like a 2/2 line of or even like a 3/2 line of Grookey, in order to play the deck and like make it function, since all the other Festival Lead cards are pretty bad. But what this one does and why it's nice is that the Festival Lead attack, if you have Festival Grounds in play, allows you to attack twice, and even if your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out, then you attack into the new active, which isn't really that big of a deal, but when you're using Driplin, its attack does 20 damage, and the attack does 20 more for each bench Pokemon, so you're hitting for like 200 damage. 200 damage on a one-stage Pokemon that requires one energy is not bad at all, especially for a single prizer. You're going to be able to get this set up super, super consistently, especially being able to utilize Grookey. So I think this actually has a little bit of potential as like a fun rogue deck, probably like maybe bottom of tier 2. But we'll have to see. Because of the fact that it hits Charizard for weakness, I actually think it's a lot stronger right now than it will probably be in the future if we see Charizard, get rotated out, or in the future, or potentially, if it just loses relevance because of other matchups and cards, we could see Driplin also fall off. But as long as Charizard's like the number one deck in the format, I think Driplin with the Festival Leads actually isn't that bad. Moving on from that, though, Iron Leaves is okay. I could see it getting a little bit of play in potential future box decks or something like that, just so you can accelerate energy on. It has the Avenge Edge attack, so it does 100 damage, and if your opponent's or if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an opponent's Pokemon during last turn, it does 60 more. So you're hitting for 160. Then you're hitting for weakness if you are going against something like Charizard, so it could be useful in that situation, or is just like a nice revenge killer that is only a single prizer, so you could run it in future box as well. Let's say an Iron Hands or something like that gets knocked out, you bring this in, chip it down, it gets knocked out, you bring in your next Iron Hands, and then thanks to the damage that you've done with your single prizer, you're able to get the triple prize cards off, re-knocking out the EX with your new Iron Hands, as well as the fact that you can boost this. So let's say you're doing 160, you have the future booster, so now you're knocking out Charizard, but anything else you're hitting for like 180. Let's say you have 2 Iron Crowns down, or even 3 in some situations, you're able to actually hit for 220. So it definitely has potential. I actually think it could be pretty good. So yeah, I guess this is a nice little tech card, actually. The rest of these cards, not super great. So like the Sinistea and all that kind of stuff. This is a little gimmick. I think could maybe be playable, but I don't really think so with Sinestia or Sinestia Chai. Sinestia? I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Whatever. Discard up to 3 basic grass energies from your Pokemon in play. This attack does 70 damage for each you discard this way. So you could hit for like okay damage, but the problem is needing 3 energy to discard every turn. I don't think there's really a good way to do that right now, unless I'm missing something, but I don't think there's a good way to do it. You would have to use like Gardenias, and Gardenia isn't very consistent. So yeah, I don't see this card being very good as a whole. The Sinestia EX I also don't think is that great. I also am not the biggest fan of the art. This Pokemon as a whole, I'm not really that big of a fan of. Pretty much what you'll be able to do with it is that for each grass energy you in your discard pile, put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, then shuffle those cards back. The problem with this is that you're going to need a lot of energy in the discard for it to matter. Where, like, even if you're doing, let's say you have 10 energies in the discard, you're only doing 200 damage. And that's not really enough. Now, granted, let's say you have, I don't know, 5 energy in the discard, which is doable. You'd be able to place the 100 damage anywhere on the bench as well. So, and you'd get around Jirachi, so like it has potential there as like a sniping card, but at best you'd have to run this as like a one-off in a deck. I don't think there's a way to build a deck purely around this card and have it be useful because of the fact that it shuffles everything back into the deck. If it didn't do that, it'd be much more playable, but the fact that it shuffles everything back means you're starting over from 0 as soon as you utilize the attack the first time. And I think that's really going to hold it back from actually being like useful on its own. Like I said, you can maybe use this as a single, like a one of in a copy of a different deck, but I just don't really think it's that useful. So this one's kind of a dud, if I'm honest. The Teal Mask Ogre Pawn basic, it does okay damage, I guess. Just 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So it's fine, but like probably not really relevant. The Tear Mask Ogre Pawn EX, on the other hand, I actually really like this card. It gives a lot of value to grass decks. Because once per turn you can attach a grass energy from your hand, and if you attach an energy to your Pokemon this way, draw a card. So it's like a lighter version of Natu, or Xatu rather, which is pretty good, and since it's just like a regular basic. And then also what it does do is that it does 30 damage and then 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. So it's a pretty good revenge killer into something like Charizard. You're able to power up your grass Pokemon pretty quickly. I could definitely see this getting teched into other decks, without too much effort. I think that it's going to be a pretty decent card. It's not my favorite of the 3 or 4 Ogerpon, but I don't think it's actually that bad. And I think that like you could do things with this. I'm actually the most curious to use this in like Tentacruel or Toadscruel EX rather, since you'll be able to like amp energies a little bit faster to your cards, powering up Toadscruel EX and kind of getting that to work. So I'm very curious to test it in that deck. But there's not another deck that like jumps out in my mind as like utilizing this as strongly, and I don't think just running it on its own will be good enough. But I'm curious to kind of see that as it comes out. So definitely let me know what else you think synergizes with this. But in my head, I feel like Toadscruel works the best, since you could just run like a one of it or like a 2 copies and utilize it, and then also have it as like a revenge attacker, depending on matchups. So going into the fire type Pokemon, we have Vulpix, Ninetales. Neither of these are all that great. We have Slugma, and then we have Morcargo EX, which is our first fire Pokemon EX to come out in this set. Its first attack for 70 damage and your opponent's active is now burned. That doesn't really matter. Really what the attack we're looking at is Ground Burn for 2 fire energies and 1 colorless, which does 140 damage, plus each player discards the top card of their deck. This attack does 140 more damage for each energy card discarded this way. I would have much rather had it as just doing 2 cards from your own deck, but since it's not, it's going to be a little bit inconsistent. You can pair this with like Cypher's Maniac or something like that to kind of guarantee you're hitting for 280. I don't think there's a great way to power it up right now in the meta with fire energy. Again, I could be wrong, but it's like, all right, let's say you play it down as a Slugma, you energy attach to it. On the following turn, you could Magma Basin, energy attach, evolve into Morcargo. But then once this gets knocked out, you're not really going to have the ability to do anything else with it. Without something like XP Share to kind of get your second one set up. So I don't know how good this card's going to be. It's definitely going to need a little bit of help. Hitting 280 consistently is good. Obviously your Charizard matchup is not going to be very good. But outside of that, you're going to need Cypher's Maniac like very consistently, unless you have another way to like guarantee the energy on top of your deck. And only flipping into one card just isn't that great. So Mercargo definitely going to be very like rogue, the kind of like a mid tier rogue deck. I don't even think it would be like top of rogue, but it may have potential if like we get better fire support in the future. Then this deck could become very good. But we're just gonna need a way to like guarantee the energy placements in the future, more consistently than having to like spend our supporter card on it. Moving on to Torkoal, this doesn't really do anything that important. Chimchar, not great. Inferno, not great. Infernape is interesting since once per turn you may attach a fire energy or a fighting energy or one of each from your hand to your Pokemon in any way you like. So it is nice acceleration. I like that it gives you the option between a fighting energy or a fire energy since you're going to be able to use it in different decks. But also if we get like a random dragon type where that comes into play, like that energy combination, then Infernape could become super like valuable. But we'll just have to wait and see. Right now, I don't think it's super great. Like I don't think you're gonna want to use a stage 2 just for this ability, but I think that it could become useful in the future. And right now, like the energy acceleration is okay, but not good enough yet. But it could be. So like like technically you could run like Infernape right with the Mercargo from before or Magcargo, and so then it'd be like manual attach Infernape Magma Basin, and then like you can do that reliably, but that would still require you to have 2 energy in hand every turn, and then you'd still need another energy on top of your deck in order to utilize more Magcargo's actual effect of its attack. So you're gonna need a lot of energies for that kind of strategy to work consistently. So I just don't really think they're a great partner. But again, in the future, we may maybe get a dragon type that uses that combination of energies or something that could be very, very valuable. And fighting energy acceleration isn't really needed. Since you have like Gutsy Pickaxe and things like that. So I wish they kind of just let you attach 2 fire energies rather than like fire and fighting. But yeah, we'll see if that card becomes useful in the future. It could be good in different formats. Like Gym Leader Challenge potentially. I've heard talks about it being useful there, but I don't play that format, so I don't really know. Darmanitan, the base attack is okay. Hitting for 210 as a stage 1 basic or stage 1 like single prizer is not bad. It doing 70 damage to itself kind of eliminates it though from being too useful. Litwick is fine. Lampent, but really what we're looking for is to get to Chandelure. With Chandelure, I think this card is like so close to being good. I hate the fact that it does damage for each card in your opponent's hand, since 9 out of 10 times giving them a large hand is just going to give them enough options to always play around you and beat you. I wish it would function more like Tinkaton, where you just stack your own hand, since its ability to give you like each player draws a card, right? And it's like that's fine. But if I give you enough cards, you're just going to be able to not only knock me out on the following turn, but probably get way more value than I will from those cards, since we're already playing like a single prizer deck that we're only 130 HP, so pretty much no matter what, we're going to get knocked out. If we're playing against Iron Hands, they're just going to knock us out and take 2 prize cards, and if we give them enough cards, they're always going to get to their pieces. The only the only thing in that matchup that could help us is like they are stuck on a small hand. But this deck doesn't really benefit from things like Judge or whatever, where we're building up a new hand and kind of crippling theirs. It's just giving them too many options. So I wish this was more like Tinkaton. The fact that it's our opponent's hand kind of eliminates it from being too useful, which is unfortunate. I really would have liked this card to be good. The new Chi-Yu. This is okay, I guess. Not super great. It is an option to discard stadiums. So potentially, if in the future stall becomes like they run into a situation where there's like a new stadium that completely like breaks stall matchups for some reason, they could utilize this Chiyu just to kind of break that. But in that point, they would just run. They'd probably just end up running more like vacuums. But I guess it's maybe an option. I don't think it's going to be too great. The allure for 2 cards could make it useful, and again, like some maybe like a like gym leader challenge format, but I don't really think so. I think this card's not super great. Um, the Heartflame Ogre Pawn EX. This is, in my opinion, the worst of the 3 because your Wrathful Hearth ability is not going to ever matter. You are weak to Chen Pao, and so it's going to KO you with like 2 energies ever, or like always. And no other card can't just knock you out. Like 210 is not a barrier to entry. Even going into something that, like, let's say you're going into Iron Hands. They may not be able to amp you very much for 210 right away, but it's like they're just going to arm press you and knock you out anyway. So it's not going to be relevant. I don't think that. I feel like I wish they just gave them like a better ability rather than the attack that isn't going to do too much. However, for 3 fire energy, we get Dynamic Blaze, which is 140 damage, and if our opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, then it does 140 more and discards all energy attached from this Pokemon. So repowering it up won't be super great. Because again, I don't think there's a great way to accelerate fire energy right now in the format that is super good. Like if we had like Welder or something, that would be fantastic, but unfortunately we don't. But I could see potentially this getting used in Charizard for the mirror matchup, since you can throw 3 energy on it really quickly. You can use something like Prime Catcher or a boss, pull up your opponent's Pidgeot, one-shot the Pidgeot, and kind of go from there is like potentially useful. On its own, I don't think it's super good, but again, if we get better fire acceleration, then it will be pretty good. But as of right now, because of the fact that we just don't have a way to accelerate fire energy that quickly, I just don't think it's in the best spot. But it's a card much like many others in the set that like I'm excited to see what they do in the future rather than what they do on release. And it'll be a card I kind of keep my eye out on in case we get that better acceleration tool. Moving on from there, we go into the water Pokemon. There's Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath. The other 2 are not great. Something that on why I want to make a point of like still looking at Poliwag and Poliwhirl or like the other stage 1 evolution things is like as we go through the list, always think about the fact that Relicanth exists now. So these previously worthless cards may actually become good one day. In this case, I don't really think, at least I haven't noticed any cards that will be good because of Relicanth, but it's something to always keep in mind going forward, and even looking back on, like, there may be a card we're all just missing that we're not thinking about because we're not utilizing Relicanth as well as we should. I feel like there's no way they made that card just so that way you could have the Linton interaction with Incineroar. Like, there's got to be other cards that are either going to print or have already printed that card is useful for. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Because in case maybe I miss something where it's going to be useful, I hope somebody finds it. Because I love the concept of Relicanth's ability. Just right now, it hasn't come up very much. We'll look at Poliwrath, though. I like Poliwrath a lot. Its jumping uppercut attack for 2 double colorless is really, really interesting because it does 120 damage, and then you do 120 more, but if you do, shuffle this card and all cards attached to it into the deck. This card looks a ton of fun, and this is going to be one of the decks I like try to build first, and I'm sure a lot of people will. The hit and run strategy here goes crazy. So you're hitting for 140, which is great. Let's say you have a double colorless, you're hitting for 120. 120 is knocking out things like Chen Pao. You're knocking out all of the other ogre pawns that we've already seen. You're pretty much knocking out like most kind of set standard basic EXs in the format. You can pull up something like a Rotom V, knock that out. You can pull up a Luminion, knock that out. You can pull up Squawkabilly, like all the support mons, all the like basic HP EXs. You know, we're knocking out almost all of those, even with even with like a double colorless. So we can run that up, get that. It shuffles everything, so we're not losing our double colorless, which is huge. We can reshuffle all that kind of stuff, right? And then you just throw up into the active, let's say a Mimikyu, or a Fluttermane to shut off abilities, or a Klefki, or whatever that looks like, whatever you want it to be. And then also, one of the things too that I think is really important here is remember that it shuffles this card and all cards attached to it into the deck. So, though I think Prime Catcher is going to be the best way to play this, what I also think is super huge is like you could potentially play like Max Belt, right? So then you're playing Max Belt, let's say you attach 2 water energies to it. So then you're hitting for 290. So you're hitting Arceus, like Arceus V stars. You're hitting Giratina V stars, all that kind of stuff for a single hit. Being able to rotate out, put back in your Mimikyu, your Fluttermane, whatever that wall Pokemon is, and going from there. And I think it could actually be really, really strong. This deck with like running 3 boss and like a Prime Catcher would be kind of crazy. So yeah, this is definitely a card that I want to look into in the future. I don't know, I haven't seen too much talk about this card, but I actually give this card a lot of credit and something that I'm really excited to kind of make work. Because even if you're only hitting for 220, if you have the Max Belt attached, then you're hitting for 270, which is unfortunately like 10 points lower than like what we're really looking for. But there's a lot of other cards and things like that to kind of get us over damage thresholds coming on later on in this set that I think are really, really interesting. So this is a card that I'm going to be keeping my eye out on, and a card I'm pretty hyped for. I really like Poliwrath, actually. Continuing on, we have Goldeen. Goldeen is okay. Maybe. I really... This is kind of my point of... I hope that this deck doesn't end up like United Wings, where it doesn't get support until too late. Because the Festival Lead ability is great, but the cards other than Diplin aren't great. The Whirlpool attack for 10 damage is pretty worthless. What it does is that you flip a coin, if heads, discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So because you're attacking twice, you're doing 20 damage, and flipping 2 coins, potentially taking up to 2 energies off your opponent. The problem is that if you don't hit your coin flips, then you're guaranteed knocked out. You only have 50 HP. And even, let's say you do get 2, it's only the active. So what anyone would do is just stack up energies on the... what's it called? You're just going to stack up energies on something on the bench rather than in the active, switch in, knock out the Goldeen. You could potentially run this card with like 3 or like 4 Crushing Hammer and just play the strategy of like just trying to discard your opponent's energies as much as possible so they never actually really get to play the game. Which is like fine. You could even run this with the Diplin if like you wanted to pivot your strategy, because of the fact that it's just 2 double colorless, so it doesn't really matter what energy you're running. You can always kind of fit it into your deck. And like you could also run Enhanced Hammer and things like that. So like there's a place where you could potentially kind of gimmick something with it, but I just don't think it's good enough to really matter. Unfortunately, since you're not... I don't believe... Like, everybody's already running, like, triple or, like, double Super Rods. So, they're just going to put all the energy back. You're not going to be able to discard everyone's entire deck worth of energy and make it matter. So I don't have much faith in Goldeen, but we'll see. Maybe people are able to utilize it better than I am, but I don't see much faith in it right now. Sea King, not really that great. It does 50 damage before doing damage. Discard all tool cards from your opponent's active Pokemon. That's an okay attack. It being an evolution and coming off the Goldeen really makes it underwhelming. Jinx, Inviting Kiss, search your deck for a basic Pokemon, shuffle your deck after you put it on the bench, and then move an energy from this Pokemon to that Pokemon. Just like a kind of a little basic setup mon, not very good. Probably would never see play in anything. Really, that's kind of a lot of these cards. I feel like they're not super great. Like the ones that are good are like kind of meta defining, or like really, really, really stand out. But everything else is kind of underwhelming. We have Feebas. The next kind of card worth talking about is Milotic. There's a lot of different Milotics that do a very similar style of ability, but this one, pretty much what it does is that your opponent's Pokemon in play and any cards attached to this Pokemon, or any cards attached to those Pokemon cannot be put into your opponent's hand. What it does is that it stops cards like Penny or Professor Tauros, Scenario, and like things like that. Super Scoop Up. I think that's what the Ace spec is called, but that's whatever. The Super Scoop Up and like things like that. It'll stop those cards, and like that's fine. I'm probably never going to play Milotic, unless that becomes a thing like where like I know that Charizard right now is kind of moving into a format of like it's playing like the Hero's Cape and the Tauros and stuff like that. And so like maybe you can get into a world where Milotic is better because of that, but I don't see a world where like it's worth the deck space and getting it set up and everything like that just to stop your opponent from doing it once, or like you'd probably only be able to stop them from doing it like once a game. I don't think it's consistent enough. And I don't think enough decks utilize that yet. But again, this is another card that, like, in the future, maybe it will become more relevant. But as of right now, I just don't really see it seeing much play. Snorunt is fine. Glalie is okay. You can do 20 damage, and this attack does 20 damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So this is, like, a pretty good revenge killer if you attack into something. You get knocked out, then you can bring this in, pretty much guarantee a knockout on whatever you want. But really where it combos and why I actually think it might actually see some play is Frostlask, because Frostlask is actually good. I like this card a lot. What it does is that it has the ability Freezing Curtain. During Pokemon Checkup, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon in play with an ability. So what you can do is technically you could run like 3 Frostlask, and you're dropping 30 damage on everything all the time. And that could come up like really, really big. You can utilize something like, let's say, Radiant Alakazam to move those damage counters around. Now you're doing 50 damage at the end of a turn to something. So you're going to be able to like knock out kind of like low HP bench targets like a Charmander or whatever pretty quickly. Then there's a ton of Pokemon that are going to be able to benefit from this. So I have a lot of faith in Frostlass becoming good. There's stadium cards you can play that like, what is it? It's something Bog, I think, where it's like anytime you're playing a basic down, they're taking damage counters. So then at the end of the turn, you're dropping damage counters from Frostlask. And you can kind of just run the game that way. And then you get around it by, what's it called? It's any Pokemon with an ability, so it's actually not going to work on like Charmanders and stuff like that. So ignore that. But it's going to be nice. I think like where it is going to matter is something like if somebody's playing Squirtle, it'll come up if they're playing Bidoof or Bibarel or Radiant Greninja or anything in that vein. It's going to be pinging that away, kind of chipping that down, setting up prizes much easier. I think this in combination with Radiant Greninja could be really, really huge, and even something like the Greninja EX we're going to see later on, since you're going to be able to drop damage counters on everything. I think there's a lot of potential for Frostlass, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I think there's potential there. If you wanted to do a deck just around this card, I could see playing like a two Frost Glass or like 3 Frost Glass and a Glalie, just to be able to take advantage of the attack um, later on. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how good Frostlass is going to be. I kind of have faith in this card. I think it's going to be pretty good, but we'll just have to wait and see. Glaceon, not super great. Phaon, not super good. The Froakie is okay. You can search your deck for up to 2 Froakie, put them on the bench, so it kind of helps speed up. Could be useful potentially, but the Frogadiers, whatever. The Cramorant's okay. You discard all energy from this Pokemon. If you do, you do 120 damage to your opponent, to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Obviously, you don't apply weakness or anything like that to the bench. But still, sniping for 120 is actually pretty good. I could see this being useful in... You could potentially tech like one of this in, let's say, like Chien-Pao. You very quickly drop the energy onto it through something like a Baxcalibur, and then you're able to ping off things like a barrel or whatever off your opponent's bench very quickly for a single prize. Or if something takes damage and you're not able to KO it for whatever reason, you'll be able to very quickly snipe them off the bench later. Or even taking out things like their backup kind of supporter style EXs. You could use Greninja, put some base damage onto it, and then come in and knock it out after with Cramorant and kind of play that style. So I actually think it could see some play and be useful. Finizen is kind of whatever, but really what you're using it is in order to get to Palafin. I'm kind of a hater on this card, actually. So I see a lot of talk about... We'll talk about Palafin and Palafin EX at the same time. With Palafin EX, it has a crazy health total and a crazy attack, right? Giga Impact for 250 is pretty huge, especially if you're attaching like a max belt to it or something like that, right? However, it can only be put into play with the Hero Spirit ability. Or not the Hero Spirit ability, the Zero to Hero ability, rather. I hate the Zero to Hero ability. So, once per turn, when this Pokemon moves from the active spot to the bench, you may search your deck for a Palafin EX and switch it with the Pokemon, or switch it with this Pokemon. Any cards attached, damage counter, special conditions, turns in play, whatever, are all remain on the new Pokemon. So, whatever damage you've already inflicted, then they go to Palafin EX. Here's why I don't like this card. In order to get this to work, you have to run your Finizen. You have to find your Palafin, get it into the active, evolve it, switch it out, and then you get your Palafin EX. But then your Palafin EX is on the bench, so then you got to switch it back in to the active with like a Jet Energy or a Switch or something like that. You're not going to be able to utilize Switch Cart, so that's going to negatively impact you potentially. You're not going to, I don't think there's enough ways to make this deck super consistent. I think that's kind of its biggest issue. It's not that it's a bad card, because Palafin EX on its own is incredible. I just don't see how this deck stays consistent over time. Unless we get better switch cards, or Escape Rope comes back. If Escape Rope comes back into the format, then this card just becomes incredible. But right now, I don't really see it. A huge weakness to Iron Hands EX is going to hold it back for sure. It doesn't KO Charizard, even though, yes, Charizard cannot KO it right away without playing something like, let's say, a Max Belt or something like that. So it would win a potential two-shot war against Charizard. But even then, you're still in a two-shot war. You're probably not the most consistent deck ever. So a lot of people are placing this as an S-tier card. I really don't see it. Maybe it'll be A-tier. I don't know. I'm waiting to see until this deck comes out to really think it's great. Just because of the consistency issues, I feel like you're gonna run into because you're gonna need to find so many pieces, and I don't think they're in the game right now. Like you run Force Switch, a Prime Catcher. There's the new support card that allow you to switch. Um, but it's like then you're utilizing your supporter for the turn in order to switch. Um, Hitting for 150 isn't enough to actually knock, like, it's a huge number, but it's not enough to knock out a lot of the relevant cards right now. Like, sure, you one shot Chen Pao, and it's going to be pretty hard for Chen Pao to knock you out at 340. But let's say like Arceus, you're not knocking out without a damage boost. You're not knocking out Giratina without a damage boost. You're not knocking out Charizard. You're not knocking out Pidgeot. So yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling to see this card as an S tier card. I think a lot of people are really wrapped up in like it's one energy and you're hitting for so much damage and its health total is really high and like all those things in isolation are great. I just want to see how well this card actually performs because I think it's going to be a deck in my vein kind of similar to like Lugia where like when it works it goes absolutely crazy, but it's just not consistent enough to really be like super relevant. In my opinion. So I would think it's kind of going to be maybe at best an A tier deck that just has consistency issues until we get like more reliable switch cards in the deck. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be its biggest issue. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a list that is going absolutely crazy, but I just don't really see it yet. Looking into Iron Bundle, not really that great. It does 60 damage. Switch this Pokemon on your bench Pokemon. If you do, switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench, so it just becomes like a pseudo escape rope, which isn't super useful because your opponent gets to choose what they make their new active. If they didn't, then maybe it would be better, but yeah, the Walking Wake isn't super great. It just does 20 damage. Then you can put, or it does 20 times damage, so you put 90 damage counters on this Pokemon, and then just 20 damage for each damage counter on it that you put this way, so it's going to do like 180, which is fine, but you're kind of like already KOing yourself in order to do it. You're probably never going to get a second attack after the fact, and though it is a Pokemon that you can utilize what's it called, like Vitality or something like that to kind of speed up your energy attachments, I don't know why you would run. I'm struggling to see what you would run this. I'm struggling to see why you would run this card. Going into Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX though, this one is the second. Okay, it's probably the most directly like techable right now in the format because you can play it with like Chen Pao and stuff like that. It's probably the best one, but I still like the fighting one more, so this is my second place out of the 4 Ogerpon. In terms of like my personal rating, Sob sucks, so we can ignore Sob, but the Temporal Pump, this attack is good. So it does 100 damage, and you shuffle 3 energy attached to this Pokemon into your deck, and if you do, it does 120 more damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. The 100 damage is whatever. Really, it's the 120 damage snipe. Very similar to something like the Cramorant we talked about earlier on. It's going to be really, really, really easy to use this card with something like Baxcalibur in order to always have it kind of powered up and use it as like a secondary Greninja in your deck, since you're able to drop the 100 damage and then 120 in damage as well. The only difference that with the Cramorant is the fact that you do not have to kind of give up 2 prizes when it gets KO'd after, since the likelihood of Ogerpon getting KO'd after is pretty high if your opponent's kind of relatively set up. But what you will be able to do is that if, let's say it's turn 2. So turn 1, you set down your Frigibax, you have your Chen Pao in the active, and that's pretty much what you have. What you'll be able to do, as long as you have like 1 energy in hand, let's say you go ahead, you Irida, you get your rare candy Baxcalibur, set that up, then you go Chen Pao, you get 2 more energies into your hand, you can immediately put this into the active, or like you can set down Ogerpon, switch into it, attach 3 energies, attack, and do 100 damage to the active, which could become, kind of important depending on your matchup, and then drop the 120 damage. So you're going to be able to start to like kind of snipe stuff out pretty easily. I could see it as an okay backup in the deck to like having a secondary Greninja style card. I could see either this or Cramorant being played as like a one of, since this deck is, pardon the pun, pretty splashable into a lot of decks, and I could see this one actually being kind of relevant, especially in Chen Pao decks that are running, let's say, something like Canceling Clones. Then even if like Mimikyu is in the active, you're doing enough damage to one-shot the Mimikyu and kind of keep it pushing from there. So I definitely see this card being useful. Zapdos and Shinx, not super usable. It reveals their opponent's hand, the Shinx, but I don't think that's really that great, since that's all it does. The Luxray EX is ugly looking, but it's not that big a deal. The 3D effect on it is a little odd, since, I don't know, I feel like maybe just having its hand still in frame here, like the other hand, would make it a little better for like a 3D effect. I don't know, just looks a little weird. It's kind of clay-like to me. But yeah, this card's actually kind of cool. So what it does is 120 damage, and you can use this with just like a double colorless energy, so you're really just hitting for like 100. But where it's important is that you reveal your opponent's hand, and then you choose one card and discard it. So you get to pick. It doesn't have to be an item card. It doesn't have to be anything. This card could be really useful with something like Judge, because you put them down to 4 cards. You look at their hand, see what's the most important, discard it, kind of keep your opponent locked. You could use this with something like Eerie. You could hand trigger them down to 5. Eerie, get rid of, let's say, like another 1 or 2. And then attack, put them down to like 2 or 1. So it could be useful there. I definitely think this card is interesting. It being a stage 2 makes it a little bit less useful, but there's ways that we can power it up very quickly using electric generators or double colorless, so we won't ever have to worry about like its energy requirements. And then it does have Bolt Strike for 250, and then we discard all energy attached to the Pokemon. Not a big deal, we're only discarding 2. Like I said, we'll be able to power that up very quickly, so that's not really that much of an issue. And hitting for 250 is pretty nice, all things considered, especially, let's say, it kind of guarantees us a 2-shot situation on whatever we want to knock out. If they don't have a hand left for us to discard, or we know there's not anything super relevant in their hand to discard, we can always Bolt Strike and deal with that later. It also does hit for weakness, so we're one-shotting Pidgeot EX, which is kind of nice as well. So that's always useful. So I could see Luxray EX actually, like, absolutely having some potential. I think it could be pretty good. Moving on, Emolga and Helioptile and Heliolisk, all those cards are not very good. Morpeko, I don't think is very good. Once per turn, you can look at the top card of your deck. You may discard that card. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the best. The only thing I can think of is you could run this as a tech card in Magcargo. So you could place it down, flip the top card of your deck, see if it's going to be an energy, and if it is, then you can just keep it there, and then go for the attack and kind of guarantee 280. If it's not, you could always discard it. So like I could see maybe that being okay, but I can't really think of like another use for this card right now, where it's worth taking up like the bench space to do it. Tadbulb, not great. Bellybolt, not great. Moving on to Wattrel, not super great. Kilowattrel, is this card good? Wild Charge, 10 damage during your next attack. If this attack does 120 damage to the opponent, no. Yeah, this card is not very good. Iron Thorn ZX now, on the other hand, this card is good. So its ability is pretty good, where as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with the rule box in play have no ability except for future Pokemon. That's huge. So what it's going to be able to do is 140 damage, Move an energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. Not a big deal, because again, we have electric generators, whatever. The 3 energy requirement, not a big deal. We're going to be able to boost that super, super quickly. Then what we're going to be able to do is have Iron Crowns on the bench. So we're going to be able to attack, let's say we're hitting for 140. We could amp that to like 160, 180, 200 with 3 Iron Crowns. And then we put on an energy booster capsule. We're hitting for 220. So we're getting past that like Chen Pal threshold. So we're able to knock that out. All the rules box Pokemon in play are already shut off, so we're turning off tons of important abilities. It's 4 energy, or 4 retreat costs rather. So if we wanted to play Heavy Baton, we can make that work as well. The fact that future Pokemon all keep their abilities is super, super nice. It's very easy to run Iron Hands in this deck, since we're gonna have all the electric energy anyway. And shutting off abilities right now is going to be super, super huge. It means Pidgeot doesn't work and we one-shot it. Charizard doesn't work. Chen-Pao doesn't work. Trying to think what else. Radiant Greninja doesn't work. There's a whole bunch of other cards that like right now I'm mind blanking, but it's going to come up to be like really, really relevant. All the other Ogre Pawns that are in this set, they're not going to work. Like all that kind of stuff, like it just shuts off so much. So I think this card is going to actually be really good, and I like Iron Thorns, so I'm happy about that. I definitely see this card having some good potential. Do I think it's S tier? No. But I definitely think it could be very, very good. It's also going to take a lot of time for, I think, people to get used to playing around it. So I think that is also important, where like a lot of times when we see abilities like this, they're not super good for a long time, but on release they're very, very powerful because people have to get used to playing around it. And so during that time, I think it's going to really, really shine. So I feel like we're going to see a spike in this card being really good kind of early, and then it'll slowly decline. But for now, I think it's going to become very, very strong in the early days of this kind of new format. Moving into the psychic types, we have Clefairy, Clefable, so they don't really do anything super great. Abra is not great. Kadabra, not great. Alakazam is interesting, where if your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused, then you can move any number of damage counters from your opponent's Pokemon to their other Pokemon in any way you like. That's pretty interesting, especially depending on how you're able to rotate energies around. This could be a nice little one-of in like an Alakazam EX deck where you're just stacking damage counters, since Alakazam EX only hits for 220 or like 120. So it's not doing a ton of individualistic damage, but you may be able to move it around and utilize it that way. It's also nice that it does confuse your opponent as well, just to kind of disrupt them potentially. It's going to require them to switch or kind of play with luck. So I could see this Alakazam being featured as like a one-of in an Alakazam EX deck. I don't think it's good enough to play solely on its own. But I think it's a very interesting card and maybe could be utilized, even with something, actually like, I don't think it would work too well with Frostlocks just because of like the deck space, like having around a stage 1 and 3, that aren't inherently very like fast to set up on their own. Could be a little bit annoying, but the fact that it's not an ability-based card means that you're going to be able to stack damage counters onto your opponent. You're going to be able to bring this in. You're going to be able to move all those damage counters around and start kind of doing a lot of extra damage to your opponent's Pokemon. So I think there's maybe potential here in this card. Not anything that's too great at the moment. But like I said, in like an Alakazam EX deck, I could see it being like a one-off that could be pretty good. Girafarig, not super great. Farigarath, also not super great. I don't really see them being that useful, even in like respective Farigarath EX decks or anything like that. I don't really see you wanting to play these cards. Chime Echo, I don't really see being super great. Flabebe or any of these cards, I don't see being super, super good. Though Florges I could see maybe getting play in something, just because of its ability where once returned, flip a coin. If head, switch one Pokemon from your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. The new active Pokemon is now confused. I don't really think this card's very good. There's the Venusaur that does pretty much this and better, and no one plays that. So I don't see this card getting used. Maybe it could, but I don't really think so. But who knows? We'll see. Swirlex is the other festival lead Pokemon. This one is the worst out of all of them because all it does is place 2 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. Since you're attacking twice, it's 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon. That doesn't do anything. It's not useful enough. This card kind of sucks. The only thing is that I wish there was fairy type Pokemon cards again. I didn't really play too much when they existed. I kind of like dabbled in the game when they existed. So I don't know why they got rid of them. Maybe there's like a very good game balance reason or something, but I just wish the fairy type cards were back. But that's a side tangent for another day. Slurpuff, not super great. Sandygast, not super great. Pylosand, I love this card actually. Not the card itself, but I just like the Pokemon and like the art. I just think it's kind of fun. Not super great. And I don't even know how you actually say this card. Enamorous? I think that's supposed to be it, like enamored. But anyway, the love resistance attack is pretty interesting actually. So for 1 psychic and 2 colorless energy, it does 80 damage. And if you have a Pokemon with the same type as one of your opponent's Pokemon in play, this attack does 120 more damage. So you're just hitting for 200. This card I don't think we'll see play in any other deck but Lost Zone, or like Lost Zone Giratina, since you already want to play the Psychic Energy. It's not too hard to get the energies attached to it, and you're playing such a wide variety of Pokemon and types that it could end up being useful. Outside of that, I don't see it really having too much use, but in a deck like that, I could see it being run as like a one-of. Sorry, I had to yawn there. I could see it as like a one-of a Pokemon or something like that. But outside of that, I don't really see it being too good. Screamtail EX. So the Shriek attack is kind of interesting, which is you can use this attack only if you go second and only if it's your first turn. But if you manage to do all that, during your opponent's next turn, they cannot play any supporter cards from their hand. I think this card is kind of interesting. Its secondary attack of Crunch is not super great. But I think in kind of a slower deck, let's say something like Gardevoir EX that's going to take you a lot of time to set up, having something like this where like if you're forced to go second, being able to like nest ball it out, get it into the active, attack, slow your opponent down, and kind of stall yourself some time could actually be useful. I don't know if... It's hard to say. I don't know if I'd like run it in anything else, but I could kind of see it being okay in Guardy. Since it's got a energy, like it's a colorless energy requirement, I could also see it maybe being used in something like Ancient Box, since you want to go second anyway, so you can utilize everything, throw an energy on it, put it into the active, attack, slow your opponent down, give yourself an extra turn to really stack all of your cards into the discard. Use something like a penny to put it back into your hand, and kind of go from there. Could be a play. So I could see this card getting some use. I don't know if it's super good, but I think it definitely is usable. This card here is something I wanted to talk about, Monkey Dory. One, because it has a funny name. But two, this card and Frostlass together are actually pretty interesting. So if this Pokemon has any dark energy attached, you may use this ability. Once during your turn, move up to 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. or sorry, you can move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This is really big because, again, let's say you have Frostlask, you're dropping a whole bunch of damage counters, right? So you go from Frostlask to having this in your, on your bench, and you have something like a Radiant Alakazam. So now you're moving potentially, 50 damage in a turn onto your opponent. And that can become very, very big because let's say they have, let's take the Charizard matchup, for example, right? You're not able to put damage counters onto Charmander with Frostlask, but you will be able to put them onto like a Barbarrel or, a Pidgeot or whatever. So let's say they have their Pidgeot and a Charmander. You drop like 3 damage counters onto the Pidgeot, then you have Monkey Dory and Radiant Alakazam. You can go ahead and move all of the damage counters onto like a Charmander, and like start racking up damage pretty quickly. So I think that it could potentially be playable there. Obviously, the charge up matchup is kind of the hardest one to utilize this in, just because of like the HP thresholds. But like, let's say you have a second Monkey Dory, then you're able to knock everything out. Though that is a lot of bench space. But yeah, I definitely think I definitely think there's a play here with Monkey Dory and Frostlask, and like a Radiant Greninja. Even if it's not like 3 Frostlask, just having like 2 on the board still allows you to move a lot of damage. And Pokemon that need not only time but like bench space are going to kind of be affected by this. I think this is pretty good. Maybe I'm absolutely crazy, but I love the idea of Frostlask and Monkey Dory working together, and I think it could actually be pretty good, especially if you're able to have Walmons. I think the best way to play this deck, at least in my head right now, is you're not looking to have something in the active that's going to be like attacking and super useful directly. I feel like having something like Mimikyu or something like that in the active, just sitting there walling, and you're dropping damage counters on everybody, and then using Radiant Alakazam and using Monkey Dory to just kind of move the damage counters around and manipulate the board as much as possible through kind of like a slow, grindy game. Hitting them with things like Iono, Judge, Unfair Stamp, things like that, I think will be pretty good. So that's my take on Monkey Dory. I think it'll be pretty useful. I have no idea how to say this. Pita? I have no idea. This bird thing. It's okay. Any damage counters on this any damage done to this Pokemon by attacks of a Pokemon with any, or if this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to it, flip a coin. If heads, prevent damage to that Pokemon. It's okay. I could care less about this one if I'm completely honest. I don't think it's very good. We're getting into the ground / fighting cards. Sandslash and Sandshrew, they're okay. Like, they're not very good. Hisuian Growlithe and Hisuian Arcanine, both of them not super great. There's Hisuian Arcanine, which could be fun where it has a colorless requirement, or rather like a non-energy requirement, where it does 30 damage, and if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them, then you're doing 90 more. So you're hitting for like 110, which is like okay for, a 0 energy requirement. I just don't think it's like enough damage to be super good, but I don't know, maybe there's like a gimmick there. Nose Pass, then you flip a coin, so kind of worthless. Probopass, it's got fun art, but outside of that, not super great. There's not enough Pokemon that are actively playing tool cards that you would want to use this against, since they would just not play a tool card. Because what it does, so it does 80 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon has a tool card attached, it does 80 more. So you're hitting for 160, which already isn't enough damage, but you'll be doing even less because your opponent just won't play an item card, or won't play a tool card. So you're not really getting anything out of Probopass, unfortunately. Timbor is not really great. Golder is also not super great. Um, but Conkeldurr, this card's crazy. Like, just objectively, like this card's nuts. I am so excited to use this card on the ladder. I'm gonna use this card a ton, so be on the lookout for that when this card comes out. Gutsy Swing does 250 damage. If this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, remove all energy. Ignore all energy for this Pokemon card's attacks. So this with Brutal Bonnet, you poison them, and then you ignore the energy. So you don't even like really need to run energy because unless the translation is wrong, it doesn't specify colorless. It just says all energy. So you don't even need the fighting energy, and again, unless the translation is wrong. So if you don't need any energy, that frees up so many card slots to be able to run within your deck. So you're going to be able to poison this thing. You're hitting for 250 damage off a single prizer all the time. You're going to be able to set it up with just like a rare candy pretty quickly. You can, if you needed energy, you could always run like Gutsy Pickaxe or something, but you don't really have to. And then, if I'm not mistaken, Timbor being 80 HP kind of sucks because you can't, you won't be able to Buddy Poffin it out. But it's not that big a deal because you'll just Nest Ball them out. You can run Artisan. So, like, getting into the Timbor won't be that big of a deal. So, I think Conkeldurr is about to be really, really, really strong. With a Max Belt, you're hitting for... what's it called? So with Max Belt, you're going to be hitting for 300 damage. So you're knocking out everything that isn't Charizard EX or, technically Palafin. Like, you won't knock that out either. But you can run Grant, right? I think that's the name of the card. You can run Grant, which does an additional 30 damage. And it'll be in your discard pile, so you'll be able to recycle that over and over and over by just discarding 2 cards, put it back in your hand, play it again. So then you can hit for 330. So you're one-shotting Charizards. You're winning a two prize or like a 2-hit race if it comes down to it. Since you're playing single prizers and you're taking 2 prize cards a turn almost. So yeah, I think Conkeldurr's really, 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 really strong. Very, very excited to use this card. So definitely be on the lookout for Conkeldurr if you haven't noticed it before or if you're kind of sleeping on it. Definitely look into it. I think it's going to be really strong. There's just so many ways to get that condition available. Going into Greninja EX, I also think this card's going to be pretty good, and it's been performing pretty decently in Japan. So what it does is that it does 170 damage. You may search your card for, you may search your deck for a card, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. That's okay. Not really that extraordinary, but really where it comes in to being very good is that you can discard 2 energy cards from that from this Pokemon. This deck does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So you're able to snipe out all around the board and just kind of like snipe backline, do whatever you want. It's literally just a better Radiant Greninja. You have 310 health, so you're doing a bunch of damage. You're gonna have a pretty good health total. Greninja EX is pretty cool. Unfortunately, fighting doesn't really hit a great weakness right now. But in the future, if it does, that's gonna be even better. But I just think the consistency you can get, how easy it is to power up water Pokemon right now, since you're utilizing water-based attacks, being able to snipe out 120 damage all over your opponent's bench is super, super good. So I think Greninja EX will be pretty good. Is it the best EX from this whole format? No, but I still think it'll be performing. I place it kind of like A tier-ish. Definitely not S tier, but it's A tier-ish. The rest of these cards, Solutia and all that, are not super great. Tanglu is also not super good. Okie Dokie is also kind of interesting. So if this Pokemon has any dark energy attached to it, it gets 100 plus HP, and its attacks do 100 more damage. So you'll be doing 170 on a basic. It does require 3 energy, and its energy requirements are all, fighting energy, so you'd have to like gutsy pickaxe onto it and then like manually attach a dark energy. So it's going to be a little inconsistent, but you are going to be 230 hitting for 170, and you're going to be a single prizer. So if you can get them set up, and it is a basic, so it's going to be pretty easy to get out. It definitely could be a solid attacker. It's not the best of the three, but it's like my middle. Like it's like the other one that I talked about before, Monkey Dory, then Okie Dokie, and then the bird would be like my rating of the three. And then going into Cornerstone Mask, Ogre EX. This is my favorite of the 4 Ogre card wise. I like the grass one and the water one more, like just design wise or like in the Pokemon game. But card wise, this one's my favorite. It's just a better. It's just a Alolan V-Star, just better. So prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. So almost everything in the format right now. Outside of like Iron Hands and like a couple other cards, it's pretty much, everything in the format. Then you do 140 damage. This card isn't affected by or this card's damage isn't affected by the weakness, resistance, or any other effects your opponent's active Pokemon have. It's not a great attack, if I'm honest, but you're just going to be like whittling away as your opponents can't really do anything about you. I think it's really good. We see how much that Alolan V-Star kind of gets to bully the meta a little bit, where like it's not super good, but it's always relevant because you have to take into account, since it's pretty strong based on its own attack. The only thing that's different with this is that you just do like a little bit less damage, and you're weak to grass Pokemon, which sucks a little bit, I guess. Since of how many of those exist looking to counter Charizard. But for the most part, I like this card a lot. You're able to power it up with, again, things like Gutsy Pickaxe, or you could even run like a Garchomp if you wanted to like super speed it, or something like that. But yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it's going to be really good, and it's also going to be a card that people are going to have to play around, because otherwise you're going to get stuck. I could actually see this working with Glimmora. Not this card, but I had to remember what it was called. Since what you could do is like you could put this into the active, right? While your opponent switch in Glimmora, drop their bench down, and like judge them, and just kind of like keep utilizing whatever one like makes more sense in the moment. I could see that kind of being really annoying and kind of hard to deal with. So that's definitely something to keep in mind looking at the two of these. So yeah, going into the dark cards, Pochiana is okay. Mightyena is fun. I don't think it's going to be very good, but it's definitely fun, where what it does is it does 30 plus damage and then does 90 more for each benched Mightyena. So, realistically, you're probably only going to have 2. So you're hitting for 180 plus 3, so you're doing like 210. If you could have all 3 out on the board, then you're hitting for a ton of damage, but like realistically, you probably aren't. But it could be like a cute little attacker. Maybe there's some sort of strategy you can do there, but I don't really see it, but I do definitely think it's cute, and I kind of love cards like that with this style of attack. I just wish it allowed you to use Poochyena rather than Mightyena. But, that's just me. Moving on, we have Venipede, Whirlipod, and Skelopod. I like this card a lot. This is probably one of my favorite cards from Black and White, or not cards, Pokemon from Black and White. I think it's really, really cool, and it's always been really bad. So I'm really happy that it's finally decent. Its other cards don't really work, unfortunately, with Relicanth. It doesn't do anything too great, but that's totally fine because it does have the Unfair Game attack for 1 colorless and 1 dark energy, which is put damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon until there's only 10 HP. This is just better Serena EX, pretty much, because what we're going to look to do is we're going to put the damage counters down, Brutal Bonnet, Poison, take the knockout on the following turn. Um, that's going to be the strategy. I don't think there's like a inherently better strategy than that. Maybe there is, but I mean that's obviously the first one that's going to come to everyone's mind. It's going to be the one that I try first, unless I find something better. You're going to be able to power this up with dark patches and things like that super, super, super easily. Obviously, it's a stage 2, so getting it into the active is going to be a little bit more annoying, but it's not that big a deal. Or not in the active, rather, like getting it powered up, but it's not really that big a deal. You can accelerate it pretty easily. Again, Buddy Poffin isn't going to work for Wormapod, or Venipod, rather. But again, not that big a deal. You can always just Artisan and Nest Ball them out or whatever. So yeah, I'm excited for Scolopod, it's Scolopod, right? Scolopod? That's how you're supposed to say it? Anyway, I'm excited for this card. Honestly, I feel like all the cards I'm the most excited for from this set are all like the single prizers rather than the actual just like random EXs. Brutal Bonnet, not super great, I guess. It's okay. Going into the steel cards, we have Skarmory, not super great. Aggron, not super great. Lairon, not super great. And then Aron, Lairon, and Aggron. Aggron is super good, or not super good, but like super interesting. So just 50 damage, and then this attack just 50 damage for each of your Pokemon that have any damage counters on it. You can utilize this with like a Dotrio, so you're drawing cards and getting the damage counters down, and then you're hitting for like 250, or even potentially like 300 damage. 200, sorry. Or sorry, 250, right? So yeah, my counting was terrible there. So I think it's pretty interesting. It could see use. There's definitely better versions of like this same card, but I definitely think it could be interesting, especially too since you can combine it with like the full metal lab. So you can help it take less damage. Then because of its attack, so you could use like Guard Claw, so it does 120 damage on your opponent's next turn. It takes 50 less. So then like with Full Metal Lab, and then you give it like an item card or something like that to kind of like boost it. You could play that strategy. So I think Aggron's like okay. I don't think it's really great, but it's definitely something you could utilize in a fine single prizer kind of strategy to just kind of mess around with. Will it be meta defining or anything like that? Absolutely not. But it'd definitely be fun. And Steel is like an okay spot right now in the game. Heatran is kind of interesting. So, if your opponent hits it, it becomes burned. That doesn't really matter all that much. But the Steel Burst attack does 50 damage. Discard all metal energy from this card. It does 50 more damage for each card you discard this way, or rather 50 times the damage per metal energy that you discard. And that on its own is like whatever. But because you can run it with Magnezone or Magneton, not Magnezone. What am I thinking? The thing, Metagross, the one below that, Metang. Yeah, Metang. Because you can run it with Metang. Sorry about that. I had to figure out what all these Pokemon are called. Because you can run it with Metang, you could potentially, like, let's say you have like 2 Metang on the board, you could accelerate energies onto these things like really quickly and hit for some pretty big numbers that I think this card could actually be kind of fun. So that could be a fun little card. Again, meta defining, absolutely not, but fun little rogue deck to mess around with, absolutely. So that is pretty fun too. Rivaroom, the rest of these cards are not super great. A little bit of a revenge attacker here in Rivaroom, but I don't think you would ever really play that. Applin and Diplin, these things are not very good. So you can kind of skip over them. I would much rather play the other 2 grass ones rather than these. Dreepy is okay. Dracolog? Is that how this card is supposed to be pronounced? I like this card a lot. The Resistance Raid, attack or ability rather is pretty good, where once per turn you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into your hand, and put the other one at the bottom of the deck, so you're not discarding anything, which is pretty nice. Obviously, discarding stuff kind of sucks sometimes, so it's nice that we don't lose the resources. We just get to pick through. We get to file through our deck pretty quickly, and that's always pretty good. And then even better is that you can evolve Dracopult EX on top of it, and Dracopult EX is kind of nutty. So you do 200 damage, and then you place 60 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon any way you like. 60 damage is a great number to attack with, and place down damage counters with. It's not stopped by Jirachi, so you're kind of going to be able to do whatever you want. I have seen people say that the translation is wrong, and that it actually does 80 damage. I don't believe that. There's no way. If it does 80 damage, then this card's absolutely cracked, and is going to be the best deck in the format. Just because its energy requirement is way too low and way too easy to make for it to do. Like, the 2 damage counters more don't sound like that big of a deal, but it actually is kind of crazy. Since you're just going to be doing way too much damage kind of too quickly, and then you're also going to get the benefits of having the Dracolock. Yeah, I think this card is about to go insane. It just 2 damage, or it just placing 6 damage counters, let alone 8. So I guess we'll have to see till the card actually comes out. But yeah, I think this card is absolutely nuts. Having no weakness makes it even stronger. Hitting for 200 damage is like not enough to KO pretty much anything off right. But again, you're going to be putting 60 damage counters on the board, so you're going to be able to manipulate the board enough to one-shot anything that like enters the active. And then you're at a high enough HP total where like you're not really at threat of ever getting directly one-shot by things. And if you really wanted to KO like most basic Pokemon, you could just run the max belt. Then you're hitting for 250. So I think Dracopult really, 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 really good. You can already utilize it into like the Lost Zone engine if you want it to. Yeah, Dreepy you can get out with like Buddy Poffins. Obviously Dracolock just is very good on its own. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for Dracopult EX. I think this card's going to be really, really, really good. Probably the best EX to come out of this set, outside of one card we haven't talked about yet. That I'll get to in a little bit, that I think is like the quote-unquote best card out of this set. But yeah, I think Dracopult EX is very, very, very strong. Toxagiri, great card as well. It's like Celebrations Mew, but for supporter cards. So it's going to add a lot of consistency to some decks and make things a lot stronger. So this could be a card that you're going to need in, let's take the Palafin EX, for example. And I talked about its inconsistency issues, so you're definitely going to want something, or my projected issues for that deck are its consistencies. So like Toxagiri is going to help that out. I think this is an S tier card. I can see it being run as like a one of in pretty much every deck. I don't see the reason not to run it in most decks. I think it's very, very good. Getting into the normal cards, most of these aren't very good. Farfetch'd, if you play this Pokemon from your hand to the bench, you can search out your deck for a tool card and attach it. So that's kind of cool, I guess. It doesn't really do anything, though, so no point in really attaching tool cards to it. Chansey, not great, but it does evolve into Blissey, which is good. What Blissey does is that once per turn, you can move a basic energy card from one of your Pokemons to another one. That's very good. Just to be able to manipulate energy around the board and stuff like that. It's got a 300 HP hit total, so that's great. And then what it also does is that it's attack for 3 colorless energy. Again, you're going to be able to, build it up very quickly when you can use your Happy Switch ability. So there's really no worries about being able to build it up. You can run a double colorless if you want, or anything like that. So it'll do 180 damage, 160 if you have the double colorless. And you may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. So you're going to be being able to attack, do a little bit of chip damage. You're going to have a super high HP total. You can run Hero's Cape, push it up to like 400. and then be able to always keep your like a full hand. So one of the things you could do is like unfair stamp or judge or whatever, attack, redraw your cards, kind of keep your opponent crippled. So I definitely think that Blissey is going to be fun to use. I don't know how good it will be on its own. It's just like a pure Blissey deck, but I think it could be pretty good, kind of as like a mixed strategy or something. Eevee, not super great. Snorlax, I'll be buying one just because I'm starting a quest soon of trying to acquire one of every, Snorlax print. Since somebody got me a base set Snorlax as a birthday gift, so a little bit of insight there. I'll be getting this card, even though it is very bad. Apom is okay. Ambipom is interesting, which is when you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may flip 2 coins. If heads, choose a random card from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals that card and shuffles it into their deck. You could potentially play a weird like deck out strategy, or not deck out strategy, but like again this concept that I've mentioned multiple times throughout this video, where like you unfair stamp or like judge or whatever. You play down some Ambipoms, get rid of their hand, and kind of go from there. I don't think this will be really playable. I think too many things have to be a part of it. The fact that you have to flip coins in order for it to work. But I definitely think it's kind of fun and cute. So it could just be like a dumb, bad, fun deck. But will it be good? Probably not. Going on, Swanna. And then we get to Blood Moon Ursaring EX. I think this card is absolutely nuts. I think there's going to be a one-of in this card in like every single deck going forward in the meta. This card is absolutely crazy. It's just Radiant Charizard completely cracked out. So it's got 260 HP, which is pretty good. But really where it matters is that the Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 colorless less for each prize card your opponent's already taken. You're hitting for 240, and you could be in a position where where you only need 1 energy because it's all colorless, for the record. So you can drop 1 energy of any kind onto the Blood Moon Ursaluna. You hit for 240, pretty much knock out, a good amount of things. You could attach a max belt onto it in the later stages of the game, knock out pretty much anything that isn't Charizard. And yeah, I think this card's absolutely nuts. Probably the best individual EX in the entire set. One of the best cards as a whole in the entire set. I think this card is absolutely cracked and is going to be one of in most decks at the very least, just because of how splashable it is, how easy it is to utilize, how much it can come up in games. I think it's super, super strong. I see no reason for most decks not to just run it as at least a one-of. So yeah, for sure. Keep that deck in mind. Going into the trainer cards, we're gonna kind of speed up this a little bit. We've been going for a while, and most of the trainer cards are not very good, or all that relevant. So Bug Catcher set could be nice for grass decks. It allows you to take any combination of up to 2 grass, either Pokemon or energy, from the top 7 cards of your deck. It's okay. Not a lot of cards are really going to need this, or like grass decks are really going to utilize this, but it could be okay. Carmine is okay, but not super great. You get to discard your hand, draw 5 cards, and you can play it even if you're going first. This could be okay in a deck that's like really, really, really... Sorry, I had to burp there. Really, really, really trying to always go first and just be super aggro and like get through its deck as fast as possible. But I don't really see it being that useful. Community Center, not super great. Cook could be okay. Enhanced Hammer is actually pretty big. I'm happy this is back in the format. It will be really good against Lugia right now, even though that's not super important. But it will come up in other matchups in the future, I'm sure. The Fable Flute is really ridiculous. It is great for stall decks. It will reveal the top cards of top 5 cards of your opponent's deck. then they get to put any number of basic Pokemon there onto your bench. So that's about to become really, really annoying. It's going to make Pidgeot stall, Snorlax stall, all that kind of stuff much, much, much better. So be on the lookout for that. Festival Grounds is the stadium card you need in order to utilize Drapple and the other festival lead cards. As a stadium, it does nothing useful, which is really sad. If this was a better stadium, like helped your single prizer stay alive, or just do more damage, or something like that, or helped its consistency, it would be very, very, very good. But unfortunately, right now, it's pretty worthless, and you're only going to utilize it for the ability of your Pokemon, not for the actual effect. Since all it does is each Pokemon that has an energy attached to it can't be affected by special conditions. Remove any special conditions from those Pokemon. Doesn't matter; they all have like 40 HP anyway, so the special condition is never going to come up. What? Why couldn't I read that for a second? So the handy circular is pretty interesting. What it does is that I don't know why I had such trouble reading that. If the Pokemon in this card is attached to, active Pokemon is damaged by your opponent's attack, even if it's knocked out, move an energy from the attacking Pokemon to your opponent's bench Pokemon. This is really annoying for Charizard since they don't play a high energy count. Being able to throw them onto like the Pidgeot or whatever, where they're just going to be useless, or like onto their Barrel or whatever else, is really, really nice. It can be really annoying for Charizard since they just want to put 2 energy on each Charizard anyway. And again, they don't play that many energy. This is already kind of a strategy with the Claw EX, where Charizard attacks into it, they lose an energy. So like now imagine you stack these together. You're getting rid of 2 energy a turn. This card could be okay, actually. I don't think it's that bad. Hazel is okay. You get to look at the top 8 cards of your deck, pick 3 of them, put them in your hand. It's like a little bit of a better research or colorist experiment, rather. But you can only play it if your Pokemon was knocked out the turn before, so it's only okay. Hyper Aroma is going to be really good in Lugia. Outside of that, I don't see anyone playing it. But in Lugia, it's great. So maybe another deck in the future will utilize it. Right now, probably not. Jammer Tower, it will be really good if tool cards are, much more relevant in the future. Right now, I don't think they're relevant enough to warrant playing Tool Jammer, or Jamming Tower, rather. But maybe it'll see some play in some decks. We'll just have to see how important tool cards are going forward. Right now, turning off Max Belt isn't that needed, and that's or like Hero's Cape isn't really that needed either. Most people are just playing Vacuum to get rid of them. It's not really worth running a whole stadium for, but we'll see what happens in the future. These 2 cards are really interesting. Kieran, what it does is that you get to choose one. You can switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, or once during your turn, this attack does 30 more damage to your opponent's active EX or V Pokemon. So this is really important. This will work really well in Palafin EX. You will have to spend your Sporter card in order to, switch it into the active, but it just gives you more switch options. And then for every other deck, just being able to do that extra 30 damage will bridge the gap and kind of help incorporate with Max Belt to guarantee one-shots onto Charizards more consistently. So it could be pretty good. I think this card is going to be played pretty often, probably as like a one-of in most decks. The Lana, I think is how it's supposed to be said. Lana's Care, put any combination of any, or put up to 3 of any combination of Pokemon that don't have rule boxes and basic energy cards from your discard pile in your hand. This helps single prize decks out a lot and other evolutionary based cards, since you'll be able to get their basic forms back into play. I think Lana's Care is pretty good and will probably see play in some decks. Love Ball kind of sucks, probably won't ever see play. Lucian is okay. Each player shuffles their hand, puts them into the bottom of their deck. Then either player can put the cards at the bottom of their deck and do whatever they like. Each player flips a coin. If heads, that player draws 6 cards. The other player draws 3. It's kind of fun. Probably nobody will use this just because of the inconsistency factor. If your opponent gets 6 cards and you get 3, then it actually just punished you. Lucky Helmet. If this Pokemon attached is attacked to the active Pokemon is damaged by an attack from your opponent's active Pokemon or from your opponent's Pokemon, even if it's knocked out, draw 2 cards. Lucky Helmet, pretty fun. Probably you'll play it with like Blissey and things like that, just to continue to draw cards, amp stuff up. I can see Lucky Helmet getting teched into some decks and it being pretty good. Will it see a ton of play? Probably not, but it will see some. Ogre's Mask, this card sucks. What it does is it lets you switch between all your different Ogrepons. The problem is they all require different energy types, so you're never going to actually be able to utilize it that effectively. If all their energies were like colorless, then it would be huge, but unfortunately you just have to play too many different energy types. I don't think this card's ever really going to get used, and I don't think there's going to be a good deck that utilizes all the different Ogrepons or even like 2 of them. They're better played on their own or splashed into other decks, so this card is pretty worthless. Piran is nice. It's pretty much Pokemon Communications, but with a little bit of a twist, where you reveal 2 cards from your hand, or 2 Pokemon from your hand, shuffle them into your deck, and then you take 2 out that you need. I can see this being played in like Charizard or something like that. There's definitely some decks that utilize this. Pokemon Communication as an item or an A-Spec would have been really, really strong. As an A-Spec, I don't think it would have been that bad. I just don't think anybody would have used it. So having it as a supporter is fine. It definitely will probably see some play, but not that much, since utilizing your supporter just to find yourself a Pokemon is not that great when you could probably like Ultra Ball it or something like that. The Rainfort, whatever. This card's okay. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may discard any number of cards you find this way, and then put the other ones back in any order. Probably not very good. Maybe for Lugia, since like you're just looking to get rid of the Archeops. So it looks like they're really trying to make what's it called, Lugia good in this set. Scoop Up Cyclone. This card is really good. We've seen it a million times. It's not broken by any means, but it's very good. Where you put one of your cards and all cards attached to it into your hand, so just gives you more pickup options. Again, even playing this with that Poliwhirl from before would be really good, just to get into the active and keep that switch, situation coming. Secret Box, I don't see anyone really playing this too much, just because of not because it's bad, but because the other A-Specs are so good. Where you can use this card, you discard 3 cards from your hand, and then you get to search an item card, a tool card, and a supporter card, and a stadium card, reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So it gets you a lot of pieces, but the fact that you have to discard 3 cards in order to do it, kind of makes it not great, because you need this card and 3 other cards in order to utilize it. So it's not bad by any means, but it's not the best. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but yeah. Their Survival Brace is interesting. I can maybe see this getting play. What it does is that if this card is attached to a full HP target, if it would be knocked out, then it lives on 10 HP. Then you discard the card. So it definitely could see play. I could see it. Yeah, the problem is that all the other A-Specs are so good that I don't really see this one being that great. The only thing I could see is like if you didn't need Prime Catcher or something like that in like Shenpal, then throwing this onto a Baxcalibur would be pretty hype, since it would mean you'd only have to really have one Baxcalibur set up, since even if they boss it or whatever, it's going to live. And I can see that being okay. But just setting up 2 Baxcalibur is pretty easy anyway, so you'd probably just end up doing that. So I don't know. I don't see this card getting much play, not because it's not good, but all the other A-Specs are just much better. Bring me to one of my new favorite A-Specs, Unfair Stamp. You can play this card only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out the turn before. But each player shuffles their hand in their deck. You draw 5 cards. Your opponent draws 2, so it's like a mini Roxanne that's an item card. It's super, super powerful. It can completely swing a game. There's a reason it's called Unfair. It's really, really, really good. I like this card a lot. I can see this card getting a ton of play, and it's going to allow a lot of like gimmick decks and single prize decks to just become much, much stronger, and something you're definitely going to have to look out for in the future. Most single prize decks are probably going to start running this, just because if you can get ahead on a single prize deck, get your card knocked out, bring in your new active, play the unfair stamp, put your opponent down to 2 cards, you're going to be in a great position. So definitely look out for unfair stamp. It's about to become very unfair. Boomerang energy is okay. It just comes back if you discard a card, or like have to discard an energy for an attack. I think it could be good. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't see any attacks that I'm like, oh yeah, dude, I'm so excited for boomerang energy. But in the future, it could be interesting. And then Legacy Energy is an A-Spec card. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides a type of any type, but only provides 1 energy. But once per game, if this Pokemon attached is is the Pokemon this card is attached to, once per game, if it's knocked out, your opponent only takes 1 prize card. So I think it could be pretty good, actually. I'm very interested in the card. Yeah, I think that the Legacy Energy could be kind of interesting. I think it could be fun in something like Regigigas, kind of getting slapped onto something, not giving up a prize card, and so then like you're really playing like a 7 prize deck rather than a 6 prize deck, which could be kind of interesting. So we'll have to see what this does. The problem is, and it's like the same with a lot of the A-Specs, it's like this effect is really cool. I don't see it being used because other A-Specs are just far more powerful. And I really think that's the problem. It's like this effect is really good, but is it A-Spec worthy to like take over Prime Catcher or some like like an unfair stamp or something like that? Probably not. So yeah, I like Legacy Energy and I'm really excited to see what it does. And it could potentially give more power to single prize decks, turning them from 6 prizes to 7. Because I think it works that way, that if you take 1 fewer prize card, you could like make it 0, because it doesn't specify that it's minimal or like minimum of 1. So if that's the case, I think it could be really powerful. If they do FAQ it or something, or like this information's out and I'm just not aware of it, that it only works on like 2 prize cards becoming 1 prize, then it kind of sucks, and I don't think it will ever see play. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on the set, guys. Thought I'd do a quick rundown. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, so if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Be on the lookout for the tournament announce date, which or the like registration open. I'm still waiting on Limitless to get back to me on giving me the permissions to start up the tournament. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you're most excited for. Honestly, Conkeldurr and Poliwrath are probably my 2 cards that I'm the most excited for out of this set, ironically. But I really like single prize decks. I think they're a lot of fun. But yeah, so definitely let me know what you guys think of the upcoming set. Let me know what you want to see next on the channel. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Thank you so much. Peace out.